Y'all gotta pick a side and pick it right now.
Jenard ain't gonna stop till he takes everything.
I believe you can win this one.
I want justice for my wife's murder.
Let's take Tommy Egan down.
All right, let's go.
They're closing in.
Am I calling a favor?
Now, in today's breakdown, we are going to be taking a look at the war that's about to unfold in Chicago, a couple of new things in and around the world of power, along with some quotes from Gary Lennon. But for those who don't follow me on social media or are not on social media full stop, I did post this over on X. The Crew Has It podcast is officially returning on January the 20th, which is 4 days after the finale of Force Season 3, and I did also mention, this also does seem very conveniently timed. Why are they just returning now, just days after the finale of Force? So I do think something big is coming in more ways than one. Of course, there's Tariq's potential return, but I do think big announcements will also follow, and that's something we'll definitely dig into in this particular breakdown. There are also the quotes from Gary Lennon where he did tease the following. There is a potential of pulling threads forward into another world, but it will be different. It will be its own animal. And on the ending of episode 10 specifically, he mentioned, the great thing about our finale is that we end it providing the audience a number of questions of where the hell are they gonna go. So that was Gary Lennon teasing by the end of episode 10, we're going to be asking the question, where the hell are they going to take the storyline from here? And I don't think it's just going to be the question and storylines around Tommy, Tariq and D-Mac. Combining both quotes together and the loose threads, the question of where the hell are they going to go, the Crew Has It podcast conveniently returning shortly after Force's finale, I do think Gary Lennon will open up a lot of doors for the future of the world of power, which I do think will come with announcements post episode 10. I'm sure the hint of the Crew Has It podcast being back, the articles will come flooding through about what's coming next. And of course, we definitely will be here to unpack the next phase of the world of power, no doubt. With that being said, I do think those two quotes from Gary Lennon sets the perfect foundation going into a couple of key topics for this breakdown around where they end current open plot points. So without further ado, let's get into all things Jenard, which will then act as a segue into the Crew Has It returning and Gary Lennon's quotes. Now, I do think first thing first for episode 10, when we do enter the first moments, I do think we need to see the reaction to Diamond's death, very much like the beginning of episode 9, where we saw Tommy taking care of JP's funeral arrangements, D-Mac's initial reaction, and his reaction throughout episode 9, which was very raw and full of emotion. I think we need to see how Jenard and CBI react as a whole to Diamond's death, because this really was a big moment. The leader of their organization and one half of CBI, a big name, has died in the world of Force and in Chicago, so it definitely will hit them and impact them in all sorts of different ways. From their organization, the way they conduct business, their relationships, how people now perceive CBI in the streets. Many will also look at CBI and think, without Diamond Samson, CBI are basically finished. I think the death of CBI's leader will create a power vacuum in Chicago, which definitely can be taken advantage of by Tommy, Shanti, and Miguel. So in terms of their organization, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a complete tear down the middle where it comes to CBI and the coalition. Some may decide to stick with Jenard and CBI, for example Big Smurf and Bones, whereas others will probably jump ship and flip sides, such as Grayskull and the RDs. We have to remember Diamond was someone who was able to keep the peace and relationships in order, albeit towards the end he was acting quite reckless and drunk himself. He was somewhat able to tell Grayskull and the RDs, just take a step back, let the Marquez cartel deal with Tommy. There's also the Assyrians. They initially told Tommy that they were staying on board with the coalition, but what about now that Diamond is dead? I do think a lot of crews and organizations under the coalition will think twice under Jenard's leadership because he doesn't have the same impact as Diamond did. And we know throughout the 48 Laws of Power, respect is a big part of this game. If you lose that, what hopes you have leading what used to be the largest coalition in Chicago? When it comes to the leadership of Jenard, we've also seen characters like Grayskull step up to him and challenge his authority. And I do think that's going to be one of the main issues going into episode 10 early on for Jenard. I do think a lot of these guys will be questioning him. There is also a lot of history here with Grayskull especially. They flipped over to the RDs after Jenard killed Lil K back in season 2. There's also the question of whether Jenard is capable of handling business with a connect like Roberto Ortega and Madame Wu. On that front, when they went to meet both, it was actually Diamond who was leading the negotiations. It was Diamond who was making these deals. Even though Jenard did hold down the CBI for 15 years while Diamond was in prison, what we've seen since the beginning of Force, Jenard really hasn't shown that he's a capable leader, especially now that he's high. If it was Shanti and Jenard, that definitely is a different story because they both worked very well together, but that was mainly because of Shanti. And that's the problem for Double J going into episode 10. These guys around him are going to be questioning his leadership. on top of questioning whether he's even in control over himself because he's just constantly high. I mean, if you're not even in control over yourself, how are you supposed to control an entire coalition and drug empire? The simple answer is he can't. He won't be able to. Raheem mentioned it twice in recent episodes when he got beat by JP and when he went after Tommy and D-Mac after Marshall's death. This is someone who just simply isn't in control at this moment in time. And now you add in the emotional element of Diamond's death, him losing his older brother in the manner it happened, a sacrifice. He's a character who's going to be all over the place in episode 10. And that leads me over to point number 2, Jenard's reaction. The problem with a character like Jenard is he does get triggered a lot. You look at the way Shanti knocked him back at her gym, he's very reactionary. He came to apologize and get Shanti back on board back in episode 8. But when she turned him down, his reaction was kind of like, F you then, I got to the top without you anyway. I don't need you anymore. Well, if you didn't need Shanti, then why were you here in the first instance? The way Kendra asked him whether Shanti was the one who did that to him after JP beat him, the way Jojo mentioned in episode 8, you never said anything about getting your ass whooped. Those are all examples of moments that probably triggered him. He really doesn't like it when people disrespect him, even if they are just telling him the truth, which definitely ties into the emotional aspect. He reacts to these sorts of comments with anger, rage, and as we found out in episode 8, pulling the trigger. Now you add in the fact that his brother has just died sacrificing himself, and the fact that he's definitely going to be high in episode 10, there's no doubt about that. It really isn't a good combination for his organization, his mental state, and also anybody standing in his way at this moment in time, and I do think that goes for characters like maybe Raheem and Grayskull. These two characters are very much on the chopping block when it comes to episode 10, especially Raheem. We all know about Jenard clocking him not shooting during the battle at the church. I do think Jenard will confront him about potentially being the snitch within their organization, so he is someone who I do expect to be taken off the chessboard early doors in episode 10. On Grayskull with the RDs, I am 50-50. I do think he's someone who's never got on with Jenard ever since season 2, and now that Diamond's dead, I would not be surprised one bit if he flipped the RDs over to working with Tommy, Shanti, and Miguel. Because we know what Jenard is when he's not in control and when he gets triggered. We know Grayskull isn't afraid to step to Jenard and tell him how it is. We saw them get into a scrap back in season 2. Round 2 could very well be on the cards. I do think there definitely is some unfinished business here between the two with what they've kind of been setting up over the past couple of episodes. So Raheem and Grayskull definitely are two characters to watch in and around Jenard in episode 10. Now, in terms of the funeral scene from Jenard's point of view, there are going to be rolling up to most likely cause absolute chaos. There are a lot of soldiers around. Tommy will know full well that he needs to protect the perimeter of the church. I'm sure there will be a lot of Insane Prince's soldiers in and around protecting them while they put JP to rest. But will that stop Jenard? The way in which Jenard will be emotionally in episode 10, him being high and not in control, raw emotion after Diamond's death, I do expect him to absolutely let it rip at the funeral. The only question is who gets hurt in the process and who gets hurt in the crossfire. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a lot of Insane Prince's soldiers fall. Characters like Cruz, you can definitely see them dying. But what about the main players such as Maria, Kay, and Genesis? Now, I would hate for anything to happen to characters like Maria, Kay, and Genesis. However, for the first time in a very long time in Power, they really have stripped the plot armor for pretty much every single character apart from Tommy Egan. For the first time in a long time, nobody is safe in the world of Power. Honestly, anybody can get it in episode 10. And had we not known that this was only closing a part of Tommy Egan's chapter, I do think there probably would be an argument to be made where we'd also be questioning whether Tommy survives too. So I don't think anybody is safe going into episode 10, whether that be Maria, Kate, Genesis, Miguel Garcia, even D-Mac. I do feel there is at least one heartbreaking moment in episode 10 to come, at least one, and if I were to lean towards one of those characters potentially dying at the funeral, if Jenard and CBI do take aim, I'd probably lean more towards Genesis, mainly because it would leave D-Mac no reason to stay in Chicago or even go to Atlanta. He'd then have nothing left for him in Chicago with JP and Genesis dead, which then means he can continue his character arc and journey with Tommy and Tariq. Not to mention it just adds even more depth to his character with him losing another character that he loves to this particular game. Now, in terms of what happens to Jenard come the end of episode 10, I do think we all know he's gotta go. There is no way someone survives killing JP. Tommy wants him dead, D-Mac wants him dead, Kay even said make them suffer. I just really do have this weird feeling that they may just keep him around and make us wait. And that being one of the loose threads that Gary Lennon keeps around. Chris Lofton definitely is an amazing actor, no doubt. He plays the villain role really, really well. and him just being in the wind somewhere, popping up in the future of the World of Power, honestly really would be quite entertaining because we know what he's capable of bringing on screen. So there definitely is a part of me that thinks just keep him around for the future. Now, something else that does tie in with this particular theory, and it's something I have raised before, is him turning into Double J. We've seen this happen to characters like Franklin Saint and Lamar from BMF. That could always be a possibility, a life worse than death. I do think it's one of those two. He either gets taken out by D-Mac and Tommy, or he does end up being a junkie full time and goes completely off the rails, but still in the wind somewhere where he could pop up in the World of Power in the future. Well and truly, we do know he has to go, we know he has to be taken care of. There's just a part of me that thinks they may just tease us and make us wait. With that being said, that brings us over to the war between CBI, Tommy, and everybody else, which will also most likely bring Tariq St. Patrick into the frame.
Closing in.
Am I calling a favor?
Now, with Tommy and the storyline around the war, we know they need to close this off 100% by the end of episode 10. I do think Chicago will be Tommy, Miguel, and Shanti's come the end of episode 10 for sure. Maybe not Miguel himself. I do think Shanti is a character who will survive. Miguel is someone who I'm still very much 50-50 on. If I were to lean towards one, I do think he is a character who may potentially bite the dust in episode 10. But for me, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and how the CBI are taken care of. So I do expect CBI to be dealt with. That does also include Double J. But during this battle against CBI, and also it does look like the Marquez cartel, Tommy will definitely be in trouble. I raised this earlier on in my breakdown last week, which was my trailer breakdown for episode 10, when he's got his back against the wall right here where it looks like his gun maybe jams. It does look like the Marquez cartel and CBI are closing in from every single angle, but then all of a sudden all three fall. Is that the moment when Tariq enters? Kind of mirroring the moment Brayden came in to help Tariq back at the end of season 3 of Ghost. I do think it will be an explosive entrance and a crazy finish where Tariq comes in and helps Tommy fight this war. But just taking it back a step, if Tommy is having to call Tariq, he really must have his back against the wall in episode 10. In the trailer, he says he's going to call in a favor. It looks like he's at Miguel Garcia's at that moment in Little Village. And I can only assume based on this from Tommy and based on the phone call that Tariq received in the after end credits scene of Ghost Season 4, Tommy's called in for help with this war. Tommy and Miguel Garcia may have lost a lot of soldiers. They may have been wiped clean, such as at the funeral scene, maybe his right-hand man Cruz and a lot of the other insane princes may have fallen, because well and truly for Tommy to call for backup from Tariq and his boys in New York, he really must be in a desperate situation. Otherwise, there is no way you see a scenario of Tommy ever calling Tariq. This would genuinely be a last resort option that he's having to take. So at some point in episode 10, I am expecting Tommy to really be up against it, and maybe even quite early on. Maybe he makes the call quite early in episode 10, and then towards the back end of episode 10, that's when Tariq shows up. I do think we're all eagerly waiting also for this team up between Tariq, D-Mac, and their uncle Tommy. Everybody wants to see D-Mac meeting with Tariq. Everyone wants to see them teaming up and seeing what they can do together. And I do think we will. I do think we definitely will get that meet. The writers aren't going to pass upon this opportunity of them getting together in episode 10. So I do think everything is all kind of poised and all set for Tariq's return and all set for the meeting between Tariq and D-Mac, where they then deal with what needs to be dealt with in Chicago. That's the Marquez cartel, the rest of CBI, and taking Chicago's drug trade, wiping Jenard off the map once and for all. I do think it's going to be an absolutely crazy episode, an insane finish to this episode, an episode which will no doubt be one for the history books. But what happens once Tariq enters the frame and after they've dealt with Jenard, CBI, and the Marquez cartel? What happens after this war is over? Now, this is where we're going to circle back around to the beginning of Gary Lennon's quotes of us apparently having a reaction of where the hell do they go from here? I personally think a new threat will emerge. Who that new threat is, I'm not entirely too sure. We've spoken about the Chen angle. Is he a new dangerous character hiding in plain sight? We've spoken previously about the Italians. We've spoken about Madame Wu and the Chinese. It really could be anything. Maybe D-Mac gets kidnapped by the Chinese because of what he did back in episode 3. Maybe that storyline kind of comes full circle. But that's what I think will make us think, where the hell do they go from here? There will be some sort of cliffhanger that just makes us think, what the hell? A real WTF moment that we haven't considered or overlooked over the past few weeks. Something completely out of left field, which then transitions us over to Power Legacy and all the news articles that will no doubt follow post episode 10. Tying this also into the current news, I do think it's also very convenient timing that the Crew Has It podcast is finally making a return after a very long time. just 4 days after the finale of Force. So don't you guys think it's very convenient timing? Why now? They've been away for such a long time, but they just happen to come back 4 days after the finale of Power Book 4 Force? Something definitely is happening at the end of Force, no doubt, and I do think there will be some big announcements post episode 10 as well. I am expecting some deadline articles to drop, some big news to drop around what's going on in the world of Power post Force Season 3, because everything does just seem conveniently timed at this moment in time, and you guys know I just simply do not believe in coincidences. Could Gianni also be playing us with the fact that he's never returning to Power, but he actually is? During the articles that are released, could there be announcements on characters and him having a kind of gotcha moment in the Crew Has It podcast? Because we know how these guys in Power love to play the game. It would be very much straight from 50 Cent's playbook. Maybe he does also turn up with Tariq in Chicago, even though he is saying he isn't. So once we finish with the blockbuster finale of Force, where I do think we know Tariq will be showing up, at least him, definitely expect some big announcements, and as always, I will be here to cover whatever they are, which I do expect to be Power Legacy. I do expect that to be finally confirmed, and maybe they confirm part of the cast, because they're kind of just probably waiting for episode 10 to be over. Maybe Gianni has actually been teasing us this entire time, and maybe he is coming back to the world of Power. Maybe we do see Tariq, Brayden, Tommy, and D-Mac in this new show. They're definitely waiting for episode 10 to be over, and then they're going to hit us with that news, where Gianni and Michael Rainey Jr. are then able to talk about it in the Crew Has It podcast. Maybe we get the news announcement of where it will be. For example, are they going back to New York? Which I am expecting them to do, if I'm going to be totally honest. I know it doesn't make sense at this moment in time because Tommy is supposed to be dead in New York, but I am sure they will find a way around that. So maybe an announcement on where the next spin-off will be in terms of the city. That's something to definitely look out for, because at the end of the day, you can't have Power and not have the theme Big Rich Town. But where is that associated with? New York. I really do also hope D-Mac is a part of the next story as well. I can't see him going to school because he is street through and through. We've spoken about the red pill and the blue pill of Power, and how he's a character who never actually kind of got the choices that Tariq got at a young age, but also how he constantly picked the red pill because that's all he's ever known. He's also recently lost JP, he just needs to lose Genesis in episode 10, which would then leave nothing for him in Chicago, and also closes the door of him going to potentially Atlanta as well. So I do think the combination of Gary Lennon teasing where the hell are they going to go from here, plus the news of the Crew Has It podcast conveniently returning 4 days after episode 10, there definitely are a couple of big announcements coming, and the battle with Jenard, CBI and the Marquez cartel, once that's all over and done with, the next moment that follows will most likely be the question where we're all going to be asking, where the hell do they go from here? For example, maybe D-Mac being kidnapped by the Chinese, and that's when we'll see all those articles and them discussing it on the Crew Has It podcast for sure. But that's a wrap on the war and plot points based on Gary Lennon's quotes around how by the end of episode 10 we'll be asking, where the hell do they go from here? So the floor is now yours. Everything definitely does seem conveniently timed, so drop me all your predictions down below in the comment section on the Crew Has It podcast returning just 4 days after the series finale of Force. Is it just a coincidence, or is it all conveniently timed? Is Gianni playing us? Is Brayden returning? Let's wait and see. Drop all your thoughts and predictions down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.